All right, before the break, we were showing that triangles were congruent using rules such as angle, side, angle, or hypotenuse, leg, or side, side, side. Now we're going to add another rule that we can use together with those triangle congruence theorems. It's called Cpctc. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And if you want to know more about the picture, feel free to read the caption and Google that. But for now, let's move on. The idea here is once we know two triangles are congruent, we can then say every angle on one triangle has a matching, a corresponding angle on the other triangle that it is congruent to. And the same thing with sides. So for example, with these two triangles, ABC and DEF, I can tell by the diagram and by my congruency statement right here that angle A, because A is listed first, is congruent to angle D, which is also listed first. And both of those are marked with a single arc. And I can keep going. Angle C goes with angle F. Those are congruent. And angle B goes with angle E. So all those angles match up. And I can do the same thing with the sides. And I'm going to start with CB because that has one tick mark here. And it's going to match up with FE. So those two sides are congruent. And going around my triangle, I have BA is congruent to ED. And I have AC is congruent to DF. Now this was pretty simple because both of these triangles are completely marked up. All the sides and all the angles have markings on them. But normally when we're showing triangles are congruent, we don't know every single side and every single angle. We're going to use like 2 or 3 different things to show the triangles are congruent. So we're going to have some stuff that's not filled in yet. So if something's not marked and you can't tell which angle on one triangle goes with an angle on the other triangle, look at your congruency statement and look at the order of the letters. So we know angle A has to go with angle D because they're both listed first. Angle C goes with angle F because they're both listed last. So keep that in mind. So as far as the types of problems you're going to do here, one type of problem you'll get is pretty simple. And I'm going to do this in a different color so you can see it well. Say that it tells you that the length of side AC is 11. And on the other triangle, for side DF, it just has a variable like X. And it wants you to find X. Well, you can tell that because DF and AC have to be congruent, X has to be 11. So that's pretty straightforward. Now it gets a little more complicated. Let's look at 2 more examples with this. On number 4, it says ABC is congruent to ADC. And again, if you look at the order of the letters, you can tell that AB has to match up, because those are the first 2 letters, with AD. First 2 letters on the other triangle. So those are the same. Those are congruent. Because those are congruent, their lengths have to be equal to each other. So we'll say 3y has to be equal to 21. These degree symbols really shouldn't be there. I think that's a typo. Then all we have to do is divide by 3, and we can find that y equals 7. So we were able to use the information about those congruent triangles to find the missing value. Number 5, we have 2 other congruent triangles. It says WXV, that's this triangle right here, is congruent to ZYV. So this triangle right here. It wants us to find the value of A, which is the measurement of angle Z. Well, we can tell that angle Z matches up with angle W. So if we know what angle W is, we have angle Z. So how can we find that? Well, there's a couple ways you could go about this, but let's do it this way. I see 3 angles are marked, and the thing about these 3 angles is none of them correspond to the other. So the 52, for example, it goes with this angle here, which is missing. The 84, it goes with this angle right here, which is missing. But one thing we know here is 84 and this missing angle, they're vertical angles. So they both have to be 84. The other thing we know is they're corresponding angles of congruent triangles. So they have to be the same for that reason also. So that's 84. And once we know two angles of a triangle, you can always find the third, because three angles of a triangle always add up to 180. So I'm going to take 52 plus 84. I'm going to add those together. And then I'm going to take that 136, which is what I get. I'm going to subtract that from 180. And that will tell me the measure of my third angle, my missing angle, which is going to be 44 degrees. So angle W here is 44 degrees. And we know that has to be the same as angle Z, which is where the A is. So A has to be 44 degrees. The last type of problem you'll be doing is proofs. And we've done some of that. And these will be similar to the ones you've done before. This will be a good review. But there will be one extra step. And you can see it here already. The final step has as a reason Cpctc. So what that tells us is we are going to first show that two triangles are congruent. And then because we know they're congruent, we're going to be able to say that two sides or two angles have to be congruent. So let's look at what they've given us. They told us that DC and BA are congruent. So I'm going to mark those. They tell us that C and A, angle C and angle A are right angles. So we'll mark those. We have to prove that CB is congruent to AD. Since that's what we're proving, that's going to be the final statement. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. That's where we are going. So we know our destination. All right. This has 4 steps listed. I'm going to squeeze in a 5th step because I think it's important, and I'll show you as we go along here. But right off the bat, it restates the stuff it already provided to us, and the reason there is given. They've given us that those two sides are congruent and those two angles are right angles. My extra step I'm going to squeeze in right here. I'll call it 1B. And I just want to have a step that says that the two triangles, BDC and BDC and DBA are right triangles. And you'll see why that's important in a second. My reason for that is definition of right triangle. I'm going to abbreviate that. So a right triangle is just any triangle that has a right angle, and that would apply to both of our triangles here. The reason I did that is because looking at what they gave us, we have to start to see how are we going to show these triangles are congruent. And right now we have one pair of angles and we have one pair of sides. So we've got to get some other information to make this work. We don't have any other information about angles. We don't know anything about the other angles. So we're not going to be able to do angle, side, angle. We're not going to be able to do angle, angle, side. We don't know these two sides at all because that's what we're trying to show as congruent. So we can't use those. We don't know about them yet. The only other thing we know is that this side here is part of both triangles, so it has to be congruent to itself. So now if you look at what we've marked, we have two sides and one pair of angles. Normally, we'd start looking to do side, angle, side, but our angles are not in the right spot. They're not in between the two sides. So our other option here, because we have right triangles, this right here is the hypotenuse of both triangles. It's the longest side. And then these two sides right there, DC and BA, are legs. So we can use hypotenuse leg. So the first thing we need to do before we get ahead of ourselves is we marked this side in the middle, so we're going to need to put that down. We're going to say that BD is congruent to DB because of reflexive property. Anything is congruent to itself. So that's important to get that down there. And then we can say, like I was talking about, now those two triangles with all that stuff marked have to be congruent because of hypotenuse legs. So triangle BDC and triangle DBA. And I'll just write HL for hypotenuse leg. And then the final step, it's already there for us because we know the triangles are congruent. these two sides, CB and AD, those are the only sides left that we haven't marked yet. So they have to correspond to each other, and they have to be congruent because corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So there you go. That's Cpctc. Good luck on the assignment.